Okay. All right, Barbara, we are live.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the National Book Launch of another Stephen Hunter book, Bob Lee Swagger. And tonight we have with us Jack Carr, author of 3 James Reese thrillers, soon to be 4, sometime in May, I think. So, Stephen, a toast to you, my love. It's so good to do this and so good to see you.
Thank you so much. And I'll drink a Diet Coke toast to you. And it's not because I'm on the wagon, it's because I'm on the wagon before I do one of these little events, because otherwise it gets slurry and romantic and pugnacious and really, really revolting. So I'll try and be a good boy.
Well, we're going to have to do this live so we can go back to actual drinking. But I'm drinking my favorite wine, which Jack knows about, at a restaurant here called Virtue. It's called Chacalina, and it's a Basque wine. And I will say, gentlemen, had I consulted the NFL schedule, we would not be doing this event as the Cardinals are. I just could hardly believe that. But I mean, who could have told months ago when we started this?
Well, you could know.
Cardinals would be in a playoff tonight.
Yeah.
Anyway, the good news is about Zoom is that it's recorded and you can watch it later. So if you're a Cardinals fan, you can shift over and then you can come back and have a good time with us after a while, or at halftime, for example. So Jack, you are in, it looks like your old office, but actually it's a new office.
It does. It's kind of a secret. So it's just between us and everyone watching on Facebook, but it is a new office because the new house didn't have the new studio built. So that's in progress. So I ripped the wall and it's crazy. So the last time I used the old office, I was talking to Stephen Hunter, recording a podcast, which drops tomorrow. And then the first time I'm using the new office, I'm talking to Stephen Hunter as well. So I ripped the walls out of the old place and I brought him up here and put them up. So that'll be the temporary studio office until this eventually becomes the library, where all my Stephen Hunter first editions will be prominently displayed and protected from the sun and the elements. So,
and I'm happy to say, with thank yous to Jack, that Jack has ordered an autographed copy of Targeted by Stephen Hunter from the Poison Pen today. And let me encourage you to do likewise. Stephen has signed them and he shipped them to us, and they should be here almost any moment, as he has done for us for years. And in fact, Stephen, do you remember? I'm trying to remember how far back it was when you came out and we actually put together a firing range in the parking lot of the Poison Pen so we could take your weapons out there and you could demonstrate. Do you remember that?
Well, most of my past is sort of a hazy blur, but if I work real hard, I can bring that one up. And that was such a great welcome and such a great start to that book. And Barbara and Jack, my first thing I have to say is my thanks to both of you, because you both supported me over the years. You've been good to me. You've helped me peddle my wares, and I am so lucky. I know secretly I don't deserve either of you, but I'm not going to tell that to anyone because someone might be listening. So anyway, thanks so much to both of you.
Hey, it's our pleasure. One of the great highlights of my life was attending the International Thriller Writers Conference, where Stephen, in fact, it was the last one. I think it must have been in July 2019. It was the last one that I went to. Maybe it was the last live one, where Stephen was one of the honorees, a thriller master, and it was fabulous. It was you and John Sanford, and it was a woman. I'm trying to remember. Was it, who else was it? Debbie Macklam?
You know
anyway,
yeah,
you were great. And then we all sat at the same table at dinner, and anyway, it was a blast. So Jack, I'm fully expecting to see you at Thriller Fest in the not. Well, hopefully there'll be one in June and it will be live.
I mean, who knows? I mean, we have to make all our plans knowing that they could get canceled at any moment. But it'd be nice when we can all get back together and not be, not have this looming pandemic over our heads with every time we travel. So that'll be nice. And that was amazing. I think it was James Grady that had a conversation with Stephen Hunter on stage there, and they did that. That was fantastic. What an amazing time, and what a great event.
It really was. It was, yep. Anyway, we've had some great moments, Stephen and I. We've toured the Library of Congress with Stephen's wife and looked at rare books. We had a shooting gallery in Scottsdale, from which I learned, how about this, that you have to get a permit from the city of Scottsdale if you want to go outside and shoot in your parking lot. Still remember that. After which his publicist wrote to me and said in the future, we would be the go-to bookstore for all books involving shooting. And in fact, Bob Lee Swagger is here in Targeted, and he's it is an after effect of his last book, which Stephen will talk about. But I want to say how much I love the sheer political incorrectness of this book. Bravo, Stephen. You know, we do need guys like Bob Lee. We really do need tough men in tough situations, and I just loved every word of this book. Did you have as much fun writing it as I had reading it?
I'm sure I did. I did have a lot of fun writing it. It was, I mean, sometimes they do become work. Jack knows this, and you know this, Barbara, from chats with other authors. But on other times, and I think the ones we live for, the ones that more or less write themselves, because they just seem to come from some other place, and you don't even feel like you're writing, you feel like you're transcribing. And that was pretty much what the case with this was. There were many a slip twixt the mouth and the cup in the mouth, but somehow, and I still don't quite believe that it's here. The book is now extant. It exists. It's a physical thing. And for so long, it seemed to go through so many phases and so many revisions and so many thises and that's that I just ceased to believe that this moment would ever occur. And yet here it is, and I seem to still be alive. I'm not dead, am I? Do either of you think I'm dead? Oh, thank you. I'm still alive, so it's okay. It's all good.
Well, in talking about Targeted, we are inevitably going to have to reveal a spoiler for Stephen's last book, because it's the great shot that Bob Lee takes at the end of the book that is in point of fact a question in this book. So Jack, I'm going to turn this over to you and sit back, and I'm going to hear your take on Targeted.
Well, I'm so honored to be here. Always an honor to talk to Stephen Hunter and Barbara. Thank you for inviting me and setting this up. And here I have a hardcover right here. I have the galley right here, and then I have my hardcover signed coming from Poison Pen as well. So everybody should jump on and go to the Poison Pen website and hit on that one that says signed copy. Click that and get a signed copy for sure. And I love the cover. I mean, I have a good time. Have you always had input into the covers, or is that something that you're interested in or not interested in, or how has that maybe evolved for you over time? Because I love this. This is a great cover right here.
I am, in fact, thank you very much, and I agree with you. I am very lots of things I'm not interested in about the book selling business, but I am very interested in covers. And I've had some really good covers, and I've had some really awful covers. I've had covers that's not bad. That's not bad. I've had some covers that were kind of disgraceful. The cover of my very first book, The Master Sniper, this was about 9,000 years ago. And the cover is a very sort of crude rendering of an SS sniper with a rifle. It's a rifle that could never exist and doesn't exist, and certainly wasn't in the book. And the funny thing was, the artist was so awkward around guns and so ignorant around guns that he got the forehand arm, either got it wrong, or Herr Ubersturmbannführer for her rep had two right hands. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which it was, but that was my introduction to the world of covers. It was a crushing disappointment, and 42 years later, I'm still trying to get over it. Now that I've reminded myself, I may just retreat to the corner and weep quietly for the next 40 minutes.
That is so funny. The next time we do this, I'm going to pull that one out because I have a first edition signed, but it's in a box here somewhere from this move. And I was tearing through things before we started this, because I would have loved to have held that up right now. But interesting, back then, they would have probably taken an actual photo, because for mine, they piece different things together to make the cover. And for me, making sure the finger was off the trigger, that it was the right pistol, that he's holding it correctly. I had to go back and forth with Simon and Schuster so many times because they have a New York model that they have photos of, I guess, in different positions that then they can manipulate, but none of them know anything about firearms. So
no, it's so true. It's so true. I mean, one of the books was, I can't even remember. I think it had sniper in the title. It could have had targeted in the title. Anyway, it was a crosshair image, but the crosshair, the subject, that might be it. Originally, there was a little figure in there, and it was originally an American GI with an M16. And I said, this book is set in World War II. Please, what are you doing? And because every one of my customers is going to know the difference. They're going to know the difference, and they're going to scream and howl bloody murder. And it's going to be humiliating and degrading, and it's going to impact sales. So you just have to, I mean, that's one of the author's crafts that no one ever thinks about, is how to gently negotiate your way towards some kind of accuracy in the covers. It's not going to happen unless you get involved in a big kind of way, and you can never lose your temper. You can never, you can never be a petty officer. You have to stay a PFC, and you just have to sort of get through it and hope for the best. But boy, it gets pretty shaky there sometimes. It really does.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of pictures of me holding weapons going back and forth between me and the art department at Simon and Schuster to try to get it just right. But I did make a decision. I said, well, I'm going to make my best efforts to get it right on the cover of all my US novels, but I'm going to have some fun with the international ones. And whatever they want to do for their market, I'm going to trust them. And even if the fingers are on the trigger and it's pointing at the person's own leg and they're doing something strange, I'm just going to let the international ones run with it and keep those as kind of fun for people to actually know what they're doing.
Now, I'm sure you've noticed the ones that are scrupulously accurate are the Japanese. I mean, they get the stuff down. I mean, they're the same people who make airsoft, so they know what they're doing when it comes to accurate representations of realistic implements. And I'm always kind of pleased and charmed, although the books are weird because they're 4 by 4 inches and the pages run backwards and the cover is on the back of the book. And it took a couple of weeks before I figured that out when I got my first one all those years ago.
Oh, that's fun. I don't have any.
The 47 Samurai, Stephen. I would love to know what kind of cover art they put on it.
I can't even remember.
That one right here. There we go. So this is a great one. This because it had those
a good cover.
It had those pages in it that were kind of look like they're old like that. I love that.
That's called Decker.
Decker.
And when they do that for you, that's their way in the secret language of publishing of telling you they believe in the book because it's more expensive. And I've had a couple of those, and I'm always pleased. And it's sort of the thing that you can't ask for. If you ask for it, it's bad form. But when they tell you, I'm telling you, because you'll get one real soon, Jack. And when they tell you that's what it is, you should be appropriately grateful and just, flatter Emily to the back wall or whatever, just because that's a vote of respect and optimism.
Oh, well, I love this cover and I love this book, and I will remember that. Now I'll be thinking about it though when they send me the next one. But something else that was, such an honor. I almost fell out of my chair in chapter 23 of Targeted. I recognized a certain SEAL sniper that is brought up here under testimony, and I about fell out of my chair when I read that. Thank you so much.
Believe me, it was my pleasure. And to be honest, I didn't do it as a tribute. I did it because it was a perfect illustration of where I want to be with relation to reality, which is I know that I have to exaggerate it somewhat, but I don't like to exaggerate it so much that the world I'm trying to create becomes ridiculous. And that's why Jack Carr is in there. That's why Burger King is in there. That's why, someone has an opinion on Popeye's fried chicken. because I like all those little tiny marks that sort of testify to my interest in keeping this quasi believable. I mean, I know, we all know that no bullet is going to hit Bob Lee Swagger between the eyes. I mean, come on, I'm out of work then. So, you know, that's sort of a given, but we try and in other ways to make it a little bit more realistic. So so I was very pleased to do that. And who better to go into a book about sniping than the great Jack Carr? Okay, so I made that was a gesture of respect and affection as well as realism.
Well, it certainly means the world to me. Thank you. And let's go. You did mention Master Sniper. So Master Sniper, 1980, first book. A few years passed between that one and when the world is introduced to Bob Lee Swagger. When did you realize that Bob Lee Swagger was going to become such a large part of your life, personally and professionally moving forward? Did you know it when you finished that book, or did it come during that first year? Or when did you know that you were onto something so special here?
And it's very interesting. It did not occur while I was writing the first book. I did not, I had no, for the first 5 books were what is called in the trade standalones. And I was very frustrated because each time I published a book, it was like a first book. In other words, nobody had read the other books and there was no connection, there was no context. That's just the reality of the book reviewing business, and there's no point in getting upset about it. But nevertheless, I was upset about it. And so I wrote A Point of Impact, and it did very, very well, as you might remember. And I wrote another book right after that called Dirty White Boys. And I didn't realize it, but subconsciously, it was all connected to Point of Impact. And it was the third book after, I think the book, I can't remember the name of the, Blacklight was the book that came after Dirty White Boys. And in Blacklight, I saw a way to make explicit the connection between Dirty White Boys and Blacklight. In fact, Dirty White Boys was kind of I don't know, it was kind of a rehearsal for the books that followed. And I managed, and I brought that off. I connected all 3 of them. I published a trilogy with 3 different publishers. What does that tell you about the chaotic state of my publishing career? And at that point, suddenly Bob Lee came back alive to me and got very, very interesting. And I was able to, I'm from an old Southern family. That's not really Southern, it's Mid-South. It's a Missouri family, and their connection to the land goes back generations after generations. And I'd always loved Southern literature as a boy, and that the whole thing of generations, the thing of inheritance, either genetic or cultural, the things of memory, the weight of parents, the weight of family expectations, all those things that I never in 1,000 years thought I'd care about suddenly acquired weight for me, and I enjoyed dealing with them. And I had no idea I would end up writing 12 Bob Lee Swagger books and 3 Earl Swagger books, and that they'd all be connected in this intricate lattice work of relationships, some of which they pop out, and I didn't even know that. And people always say to me, did you plan all this? I said, hell no, I can hardly plan my shoelaces being tied correctly. There's no way I can plan 12 books. And yet that's what it became. And it was fabulous fun.
Especially in this one, it seems like you get to explore that family history. You get to explore that genetic key to violence and being a sniper and being a protector. Was that the intent at the start of this book?
I saw, when I started it early on, I saw a way to do that. And I'd been trying to get the origin story of the Swagger talent. I tried to get that into print for, decades. And I at one time tried to sell a novel called Redcoats, which was going to include that story and that information. And someone at Random House sat down and had a very, the kind of conversation that only could take place in publishing. Steve, it's a great idea, but I don't think the market is too interested in a book about the revolution, and so it's with great regret we would, which is their way of saying, get out of here and come back with something that I can sell. And so I always carried that, and I was looking for a way, and I saw a way to do it here, and it was great fun. I mean, it was. One of the things I like about it is the contrast between the two languages. Most of the book is written in sort of a contemporary, rather ironic, sarcastic voice, and then I revert to my imitation of 18th century British prose. And I love for some reason, I love to do that voice. I've done several books in that style. I don't know why, but I just love to do it. I guess it's the George Sanders in me or something like that. And having them both on the same cover, I love those juxtapositions. That was fun for me. And the other thing is I love sword fights. Kid growing up in the 50s, seeing all the great Errol Flynn movies, seeing all the great costume pictures, always sword fights. Always gripping. My favorite sword fight is the battle in El Cid between Charlton Heston and the other city's champion. That's a great sword fight. Oh, I will say the sword fight in The Last Duel, at the end of The Last Duel, the Ridley Scott picture, is very good. It's one of the best ones I've seen, and it would certainly go in my top 10, maybe my top 5. But I do love sword fights, and I'm always looking for ways to get sword fights into books. And I had great fun. I had an image of this fight in the rain, in the mud, a Florentine, that is, with a sword in each hand. And I just really, I wouldn't have been satisfied with my career if I hadn't gotten that out. And it's like, so as you say, I managed to find a justification for putting that in this book. And does it fit? Yeah, I think so. Are some people going to have problems with it? Yeah, I think so. Would I do it any other way? No, I don't think I would do it any other way. This is what I wrote. This is what it is. And if you don't like sword fights or snipers, you're probably could do something wiser with your $28.
And your time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we all have
More
that.
importantly, your time. That's right.
Yeah.
I love how you switch back between the voices. Like, it seems like we were just doing this yesterday, but it was a year ago that we were all here together talking about this. And I love how you can switch between those different voices. It's so much fun, and you can tell that you have fun doing it.
You can.
Absolutely.
Let me just insert a comment too, Stephen. If this is the way that you let us know how the Swaggers got to Arkansas. Because
yes, no, I wanted that too.
At the
that
end
was,
of the
I've teased it for a number of books.
Yeah.
I kept evoking this mysterious couple that showed up in 1780, and that was the foundation of the Swagger line. And I always knew who they were and what from whence they had come, but I was coy, I'm so darn clever in not giving the information out. I just wanted to tease it, and I felt like I finally wanted to make that clear. I will also say it was not particularly popular in the professional publishing world. There were many people in the Citadel of New York and its high buildings who didn't quite get it. And I felt that to really get it, it's really for people who have read, who've been with me all these years and know the Swagger family and have a vested interest in, want to know more about where the Swaggers came from. I've done now 3 generations of Swaggers. I've always had in mind to do a Swagger. I've 2 others I'd like to do. One would be set in the in the Old West. There's got to have been a sheriff or a marshal swagger. And another one I'd like to do, this is rare, there was an extremely intense dueling culture in South Carolina in the 1840s. And I would love to somehow get, and that's no one has ever done anything with it. No one even knows about it. I would love to get a book. I would love to get I have a story in which someone hires a swagger to come to South Carolina to avenge his son, who was killed, was overmatched in a duel and killed. And because dueling is also something that's extremely fascinating to me. And that would be fun to do. I'm probably not going to do it, but I've always had a hankering to do that. But I do like, family history it's always interesting. Everybody's family history is always more interesting than they are. Believe me, it's certainly true in my case. So
You're going to have to write an opera libretto, kiddo, because there are a couple of great operas that are all about dueling. Eugene and
well,
Onegin,
I
The
did not
Sorrows
know
of Young, Werther, and all,
Yeah.
they all hinge on dueling. So something you can do.
Well, I have thought, I will tell you, and just because we're bouncing around here, I have thought about writing a book based on an opera. And the opera is William Tell. And that's like the primary marksman story. Jack is a real William Tell. I'm a wannabe William Tell, but I thought about using that as the basis of a story is set in modern America. So maybe I will, maybe I
That'd
won't.
be really fun because the real William Tell opera is over 5 hours long, so it's hardly ever produced. It's so staggering. Anyway, take us to Boise, Idaho, Jack. Tell us about why this book is in Boise, Idaho, because I mean, there are very few mysteries that I know of that have a background in Boise, for which you apologize, I might add, Mr. Hunter.
Well, I never got out there because of A, my age and the difficulty of traveling, and B, because of the coronavirus. And so my Boise is fictitious, or not fictitious. It's drawn from the internet. It's drawn from looking at various top 10 restaurants in Boise, Idaho, and that sort of thing. And I imagined a setting, a modern high school with a modern multi-use gymnasium / arena or auditorium, and that was lots of fun for me. And I tried not to. I hope I didn't get it so wrong that Boise people are going to be angry at me. I hope they'll appreciate that I give their town good reviews. And I have been to Boise 1,000 years ago on a book tour, and I just remember a very pleasant city, but I have no specific. And the other thing is, I might have it mixed up with Barcelona. I've been to both places, and I think they sort of combined into one sort of beautiful city in the sunlight near the mountains. And maybe that's going on there. But the truth is, you can, as a writer, you can create things off the internet in a way that you never could, 25 years ago. You couldn't punch a button and look at 50 pictures of downtown Boise and get a sense of the feel and the smell and the traffic and the architecture and the local, how the locals dress. And that, so you'd be a fool, particularly if you were my age and can't get around as well as you used to be able to, not to use that. And so, with all due apologies to Boise, I did the best I could on Boise. And
Something tells me that they're not going to be too upset. I've been there fairly recently, and I think no one's going to be too upset with you on that.
Well, they seem like real decent people, and I know one thing about people in the West is, boy, they are workers. They work so hard. Most of them have 3 jobs. Oh well, it's time to get over to the waitressing job. That sort of thing. And I don't know if they have time to read, so maybe they won't be mad at me because they'll be so busy working they won't notice. but
It's
fun.
possible. It's possible.
Yeah.
I was trying to get to Israel and Montenegro for this the book that I'm editing right now. I got a couple more weeks of edits here, but with coronavirus and Israel shutting down and all that, it's just questions about doing that. I just kind of chalked it up, and by midsummer I said it's probably not happening. So I'm going to use this thing called the internet and do my research there. But we're lucky to have that. And, you mentioned those films earlier that you grew up loving with the duels and I of course watched those Errol Flynn movies growing up as well. I have wonderful memories of those. But did those films, did they propel you into being or wanting to be a movie critic? And for those listening, we have a Pulitzer Prize winner that we're talking to right here in film criticism in 2003, I think it was. But what were those films? Was it love of films that made you want to sit down and watch 250 a year? I think that was the number of films that you were watching at a time and writing up each week.
Yes, they were, as a matter of fact. I mean, I was always drawn to narrative in any form. I was drawn to narrative as books that I read. I was drawn to narrative in comic books that I read. And of course, I love the movies. And one of the things I did, not realizing, but ultimately became so important to me, was I did go to the movies every week for about 25 years. And that was before I became a film critic. And I just always kept up. And I think you'll find this is common with a lot of film critics. I had a sort of an adhesive mind for movie facts, for movie lore, and for movie connections, even to the point where I could recognize, you come so you learn to know the character actors or the extras, and the lighting signature of the cinematographer, and you can identify the composer from the first three bars. You can tell who designed the titles and what other movies he does, whose other movies. You're just recording and indexing that information without meaning to. It just happens naturally. And what that means is, at a certain point, you're in possession of a great deal of movie knowledge, and this is before the internet. And I don't know how you could do that job without that big chunk of hard drive in your brain full of movie stuff. Mm-hmm. And I possessed that without really meaning to possess it. The reason I wanted to become a movie critic was that I discovered movie criticism really back in the 50s. The Daily News, Chicago Daily News, an afternoon paper, had a film critic named Sam Lesner. And I would always look forward to reading his stuff. And it suddenly occurred to me that was a way in which I could combine my love of movies and my facility at writing. And I somehow knew that I wasn't cut out for a movie career, because that involves all kinds of external issues. You've got to get into the business, you've got to negotiate a career, it's a pretty treacherous business. It's a one strike and you're out business. It's there's a lot of people who are somewhat smarmy. Not only will you be betrayed, but if you're going to have a career in the business, you will betray. And I understood that I was much better sitting at a typewriter than I was at a story meeting in Hollywood. And as it worked out, 35 years later, I found myself in a story meeting in Hollywood thinking, what the hell am I doing here? Who are these people? This is awful. I hate this. So I made the right decision. And it was more fun. It was more fun writing about movies than being connected to movies, And the other thing is, maybe you have not found this. I'd love to hear what you say, because I know you've done some writing on the television show that is coming out about John Reese. But To me, writing screenplays is a very technical and not at all satisfying kind of writing. And I've taken a whack at it a few times, and somehow I just don't quite get it. There's secret rules, there's shortcuts, there's things that, I was astounded to discover a rule: stars never explain. So you've always got to have someone else in the scene to explain, so the star can look sort of majestic and troubled in profile, but he's not going to be the guy who lays the pipe. Well, if we don't move our battalions up here, then the Germans are going, and I would never know that. I wouldn't know that. Who would know that? But they know that, and those kinds of rules. And they also know a really good screenplay, the dialogue, they can get so much into so many words, into so few words. It's just really, it's like a poet's talent. Whereas when I write dialogue, it's really not dialogue, it's competing speeches. It's people like me who will not shut up, yappity, yappity, yap. And even if these people who are grading or responding to these aren't particularly articulate, you can just see the way their faces knit up in consternation that you haven't quite found what they're looking for. And so when I got back from my screenwriting adventures, I felt like Jimmy Stewart at the end of It's a Wonderful Life, when he reaches into his pants pocket and he finds Zuzu's pedals, and I'm so glad I found my Zuzu's pedals and got out of that business. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting because I went in there expecting that betrayal, expecting to just be a sponge. I went in there having watched so many films, having been adapted from different books, TV shows adapted from books, kind of knowing what I like as a viewer, as a fan of both the novel and then maybe the film, maybe not, depending on how it went. So I had this, similar to you, I had this foundation as a fan of film, a fan of books, and having just read so much, but not done the screenwriting piece. So I was a sponge, and I went in there knowing that they're probably going to take this book and they're going to make it a lot different. So I went in there expecting that. I think that helped.
That does help.
And then I learned a ton. And you're right, those secret rules, because I wrote one thing. I had James Reese leave this room and I had him go back, and they said, oh, no, you can't go back into some place where you just came from. And now I notice it on television and film. If an actor goes back to where they just were, it stands out to me because I was told that's. I
didn't know that. That's very interesting, though. But that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, one of those hidden things. Yeah. But it was interesting because now you have 15 people in a writer's room. Maybe they have their own agenda, or they're trying to get their own name out there. Yeah. These days, they're trying to get a lot of politics in there, regardless if it has anything to do with the story or not. So you're dealing with all this. But I was so lucky that I had Antoine Fuqua and I had Chris Pratt, and so when that sort of a thing happened, we'd get together and huddle up and talk about the strategy on how we were going to come in here and figure this out. And I'm going to send a text, and Chris is going to send an email, and then Antoine's going to call, and we're going to do it at these certain times. And we won on pretty much everything. So it was a very interesting experience, and I feel very fortunate that I had those two guys and the showrunner, David Agilio in particular, all those guys together as part of this team, because it's an interesting landscape.
Before you leave this topic, what is the name of the movie or the show, and when is it you're expecting it to come out?
Mine or
yours?
So The Terminal List, and it's still top secret when it's coming out, but we can expect it sometime in 2022. And,
now, is it a movie or is it a Netflix series?
It's an 8-part series for Amazon Prime. Yep. And I think that was the way to go. And I saw it I've been, not editing. I give my notes for different timestamps, and then I send it in and they make the changes. But I've been doing that on my computer. And last week, for the first time, I figured out how to send it to our smart TV. And so I watched the first 3 episodes on the big TV with the sound and everything. And it was a completely different experience than watching it on my little laptop. And I could not be more pleased. So hopefully it's going to be fun. Because
tell me if you didn't have this experience. When I first saw some of the screening from what they call Shooter, it was like encountering my dream in someone else's head. I mean, it was all the the chronology was right, the action was right, the characters were right, and yet it was completely different. And it was a very dislocating, it's not disturbing, but somewhat disorienting reality. Now it passes very quickly, but that first moment when you see it, the culture shock is considerable.
Well, I think because I was involved from the get-go, when it was just me and the showrunner writing that first episode,
Yeah.
that they didn't do it on their own and then show it to me. I've been intimately involved with its creation at every single step.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
So it's kind of I accepted early on. Obviously, having read Point of Impact, here's my original paperback, by the way, from way back then. So having seen that and seen the movie, to have read First Blood and to see the movie, to just have so many experiences like that, and to have heard so many authors talk about their experiences, seeing their books, their vision, their characters adapted to a screen. So I went in there expecting them to destroy the whole thing. And so I kept my bar low.
That's good.
And I think that helped.
Very wise. Very wise.
And then I was pleasantly surprised, especially after, I probably shouldn't say this, but after the writer's room, they go on to different projects. And now it comes back to just being you and the showrunner again.
Yeah.
And a couple executive producers and Chris and Antoine. And then you get to morph it. And maybe those scripts don't look exactly like they did when they left the writer's room, which I guess is fairly common in Hollywood. So for me, I was just learning, and I just felt so fortunate that they were making it into something that's hopefully going to sell a couple books.
Yeah.
Well, it's really exciting. But talk to me a minute about Targeted. When I said it, I thought it was gloriously politically incorrect. What are the politics involved in this? Because they spring out of your last book.
Let me just start by saying that one of the great, something that offends me that happens in this country far too often, is something like the Kim Potter case, where people who have not been in action, who know nothing about action, who have never imagined action, who can't imagine action, who have no experience in action, are suddenly judging someone who is a professional at action and holding that person responsible against standards that are completely nonsensical. And as I feel she got railroaded into she made a mistake. It happens. It's terrible. It's a sloppy, violent business, but sloppy, violent things happen in the incarceration business, in the arrest business. So it is. This was obvious way before Bob Lee Swagger. Let's say I have had an idea. I know that Bob is a violent man. I know that he is willing to pull the trigger and terminate somebody. And he is always, he's always operated in this sort of quasi-legal area where he is a consultant or under contract to the FBI or to Mossad or to somebody. So he's able to get away with it, but he's never been confronted by someone who sees a political value in putting him on some sort of trial. And I thought that would make a terrific, that'd make a terrific fulcrum for a book. It took me a long time to figure out how I do it. And it's a 2-decade-old idea. And I've gone through all kinds of, some ridiculous and some dangerous and some ridiculous, just insipid ways of putting it together. And I'm driving in downtown Baltimore. Suddenly the world turns green. What am I talking about? It's just that the world turned green. And I looked to my right, and the reason it turned green was because a Baltimore, Maryland Department of Prisons bus had pulled up right next to me, and it was painted olive drab as if in the middle of World War II, it belonged at Normandy or Iwo Jima. And I saw that bus, and it was really a formidable, just existentially object of dread. It was just amid all the colors, this utilitarian symbol of authority. And you knew that the men contained in it were probably, some of them at least, very dangerous. And I suddenly thought that the bus could be a useful tool in building up a scenario in which Bob was, what I wanted to do was put Bob up to judgment by a lot of people who lived in glass houses, and then suddenly break the glass on their houses and put them in the real world of danger and violence and irrational occurrences of the sort that occur in those kinds of incidences, as happened just last weekend in Texas. And you know, I wanted him. I wanted them to suddenly need him desperately, and instead of feeling contempt and seeing him as someone to feel some moral superiority to, they desperately need him to save their bacon. And that's the story of the book. And I, you know, where I was going to set it in Washington, but the thought of brigands taking over a hearing in Washington is ridiculous because of all the security. So then I decided there is such a thing as a field hearing. I decided to move it out to Boise. That's how we ended up in Boise, and where I'm guessing the security would be less formal. And I sort of, and the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to set it in real time. I didn't want it to be one of those protracted Belson things that goes on for weeks and weeks. I wanted, it gets real ugly real fast and has to be over really fast. And those were the rules. And once I started that, again, I had a great deal of fun doing it, although it took a long time to get it to get it to what I think is now, it's more or less its ideal stage. It was difficult to organize. It was difficult to keep track of it, and it was I also wanted it funny, and I do parodies of two well-known politicians that I think are very funny. They happen to be politicians whose beliefs are considerably different than my beliefs. And so I would describe this book as a satire with machine guns. And I think that people, particularly my readers, will get this. It's not for a lot of people in media. It's not for a lot of people in politics. It's not for a lot of people connected with the current administration. It's probably going to play better for Trump voters. It's probably going to play better for gun owners. It's probably going to play better for people of the right than it's going to play. Maybe I'm wrong on this, for people of the left. And we'll just see. I mean, I could be hated and canceled. I could be hailed as a truth teller. Most likely it'll sell what my books usually sell, and it'll go into the books in the black, and I'll move on to another book. And again, there's nothing I can't predict. I've never felt so awkward about a prediction of where a book like is going to go as I am for this one. Is that enough?
Interesting to hear that. That's fantastic. I love it. I mean, it's obviously it's honest, and it's what people. It's what your readers want. And for people that are just, I don't know how anybody could just be discovering you, but if by chance they are and they're jumping in with this book, well, then you have, of course, the entire series to go back and enjoy and move through. So I almost envy somebody that's finding this today, but jump in with this one, then go back to the first, but then don't just stick with Bob Lee Swagger, because after you read all those, then go back and read Master Sniper or Tapestry of Spies, all these different works by Stephen Hunter. And I want to read one thing here, just so that you know. And you talked earlier, Stephen, about going into the theater and knowing, I know the director, I know who did the lighting, the cinematography, because you have this foundation and experience of all these films and this love of film. And it's similar with you. If I read one paragraph and there's no author attached to it, and I read it, I know that it is you. I can tell. And that actually happened. And I was reading a magazine, flipping through, and I started reading Guns of Hollywood, something that I bought. And first paragraph, I said, this guy sounds a lot like Stephen Hunter. And I looked to written by Stephen Hunter, right there. And so I want to read something here from something that you wrote for the Post in November of 2001. And you say, that is why when you look at the small arms of the Taliban and the Northern Alliance and the sleeker things our soldiers carry, you can see not just things and stuff, but ideas and metaphors, the drift of violent history over the dusty hills of that raw land. You can feel shadows of the past never forgotten. When it is over and history has moved elsewhere, only the bones and the guns, one whitening, the other rusting, will remain. I mean, that is beautiful. It's haunting. No one else could have written that but Stephen Hunter. And that's what you get from all of these books, novels, articles. So thank you for sharing this passion, sharing this talent with all of us. And everybody needs to jump in, get this from Poison Pen, signed, and then go back and explore all the wonderful novels that you have to explore after reading this.
As I say, Jack,
Stephen,
I don't
look at it
disturb
this
you.
way. You know, Jack and I are different ages, different generations, different genders. I'm totally uninterested in weaponry. The reason I read your books is I love the characters. I neither know nor care what kind of gun they're firing or whatever, but I think your characters are amazing. The only book you ever wrote where I figured out what was going on with the weaponry was the 47 Samurai. If you remember, I wrote to you in the middle of it.
That's right.
And I told you I thought how it was going to come out. And you
Swords
said,
are pretty easy to
right. But you know,
figure out how to use.
The woman in here, the politician who calls the hearing, the committee hearing in Boise, Idaho to review Bob Lee's. I mean, she's my age, you know, and she's, I mean, we all know who you think she is. I sort of even dress like her a little bit, you know, that I do a little tribute here. And, you know, it's a lot of fun to see people like that through your lens. It's very difficult to have a sense of humor about what's going on in this country right now.
Oh boy,
and especially about the people in theory running it. You know, and there's so many different points of view. I don't know if you read the Washington Post today, but they had a really interesting essay about, I never could pronounce his name, but, you know, the Serbian tennis guy, you know, why he behaved the way he did, which I thought was fascinating. And, you know, there are people like him. I mean, you know, that want to be like on the edge of 1%. And I mean, they sort of portray him as a psychopath in a nice way, not a killer, but, you know, a person who's so into himself, he doesn't actually care about anybody else or can't see it. And I thought that was fascinating, but I've always thought you had a genius for rendering even your villains in a way that we can all kind of understand. And you haven't even mentioned the Chechen guys. I mean, the 5 guys in this book that are the bad guys are absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Barbara. I've sort of gotten away from absolute evil. The first book that we mentioned, The Master Sniper, was here was an SS officer taking part in the Holocaust, and it was okay. He could be absolute evil, but the truth is, when you write a book, at least when I write a book, and I'm trying to put myself in somebody's head, and it goes on for months and months and months. He's got to be more than just evil. He's got to be created by some dynamic. He's got to have his memories. He's got to have his allegiances. I always try to give them, all of them, a moment of mercy. I give them, sometimes I give them children. To me, it's much more interesting when actual human beings fight to the death than when a crusader destroys a dragon. I don't do dragons, or I try not to do dragons. I might have made more money if I had done dragons, but it doesn't feel right if it's too black and white. And I do try and get to that little part of the forest where.
But you both know that every good thriller has to have a great villain.
Absolutely.
In fact, thrillers actually hinge as much or more on the villain as they ever do on
Well,
the
we wouldn't
protagonist.
love
And if it's just a one-dimensional villain, who cares?
exactly, and we wouldn't love Hannibal Lecter if he wasn't witty. You know, he's got to be witty. That makes him palpable. If it was just what he did, you couldn't read the Thomas Harris books. But maybe giving him that sort of epicene, aristocratic irony, ironic take on all sorts of things, that makes him extremely amusing, you know, in a way that makes those books, gives those books a lot of energy and charm.
Well, you did a terrific job with the Chechen guys, don't you think, Jack? Did you meet guys like that? You must have.
Well, there are so many touch points. That's what I love about all these books. Even before I was in the military and was reading this, you know, there's touch points with history and with snipers and what I expected that culture to be like. My experience in the gun culture, training for the military. So there are bits and pieces of real humans, whether they're people I met in person, I studied in person but never actually spoke to, or that we all have a touch point with somebody, because as you say, there's a piece of humanity to each one of these characters. Otherwise we wouldn't be interested in them at all. So every character that Stephen Hunter creates is fascinating.
It's absolutely amazing. And you know, I do think that your long career in film, watching it and reviewing it, has a lot to do with the way you can draft these astonishing characters, Stephen. I mean, you know, there's a real visual component to your books, which I think, you know, your screenwriting life has honed, you know. But I never want to go away from one of these conversations with people thinking it's all about the guns, you know, because actually it's all about the guys. And the guys happen to have guns, but it really is just wonderful. Patrick, let's call you up and see if we have questions.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right. Well, first of all, satire with machine guns. What a great line.
It is
Fantastic.
Yeah. That should be a subtitle of a future book.
Yeah. See, that's what I mean. It's all gold. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing, even off the cuff.
Right. Steve, who's viewing, would like to know a little bit about the Jack the Ripper book. And he was asking about, you know, have you talked to serious Ripperologists about your theory of who Jack the Ripper was?
Yes, I in fact published a long piece in a magazine, an English magazine called The Ripperologist, which, as you might suspect, is quite a Ripper, is the center of Ripper culture. And we tried very hard in that book. I had a good friend doing the research, and we try to work as much research into it. And I will say that, you know, the theory in the book, the published version, I Ripper, that's not really a theory, that's a novel. It's a fantasy, it's fun. But in researching it, I came up with another theory that I still believe in. And another one of the projects I hope I get to, in Otto is crazy for me to write this book for him. I want to take another swat at Jack the Ripper. And I want to argue this other theory, the real theory that I came up with. And I would just love to go back to that world. It's a fantastically interesting story. It's mesmerizing, and I love, you know, Victorian London is just it's like Imperial Rome. You know, it's both the highest of the high and the lowest of the low, cheek by jowl, as they say. And I'd like to take another swat, but this time I would do it. It wouldn't be. I'm babbling here, but I mean, I have the book I want to write very much in mind. I have the detective in mind. I have the stages of the investigation in mind, and it wouldn't be a fanciful connection to British literature as I Ripper was. It would be the theory that I still believe in and that I evinced in the Ripperology magazine. And it's just as I say, it's fascinating and it's endless, and everybody, it's just everybody is entitled to their own take. Go through the data and try and put together a meaningful examination, a meaningful, a logical, a coherent theory of the crime, and if you succeed, guess what? Nobody cares. But nevertheless, but they do care because it's so interesting, and the event is charismatic in itself.
Has anybody come close to matching your theory that you've read?
Not that I'm aware of. Shortly after I published, a British screenwriter whose name I can't remember published a huge book in which it was like it is, and his theory was radically different than mine. His was about it was about Masonry and the play of Freemasonry in this, and the usage of Freemasonic or Masonic symbols, and the fact that everyone investigating it was a high degree Mason. And he had an elaborate theory, and his theory is one that's been suggested before. There was also an American serial killer at the same time in Chicago. He was the guy that was in The Devil in the White Palace, the nonfiction.
Devil in the White City. Yeah.
The Devil in the White City. And some have suggested, and this Brit argued, that this guy had been in England during and was Jack the Ripper, and then came back to America and became the Devil in the White City. I don't think that's right, because Jack was an outdoors kind of guy, and the Devil in the White City was an indoors kind of guy. And to me, that change in modus operandi is just too vast to use, to believe in. And so I don't buy that theory, but there's other reasons, other problems with. But I mean, the raw material is so rich that it sustains any number of theories, and it's like a good party. The more, the merrier. It's just always interesting.
I would love to read Stephen Hunter's interpretation of the Black Dahlia murder.
I thought about that but unfortunately, it's too LA. You've really got to know, and I love LA, and I love LA noir and LA
post-war
story.
period.
Yeah, and I love LA film noir from the late 40s and the 50s. I love LA when it was a wooden city in the 30s. And if you see the old pictures, all the buildings were wooden, and they were all they had all these balconies and stairways, and there were stairways all over the city that were really cool, if you don't mind me saying so. But the guys who know LA know it so much better, and I couldn't master it. I had an idea for a story to be set in LA, and I was going to call it, this is a pretty good title, maybe it's been used, I don't know. It was, the name of my book was going to be Hell A. Does that sound new? And I have a fairly good working plot, but again, it's if I live to be 130, I may get all my projects done, but I don't think I'm going to. So I would like to play around in LA. That would be fun, though. LA in the 40s was great.
That John Gregory Dunn book, True Confessions, I think is a kind of an unknown classic of that period.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Yes.
Yeah. Getting back to our audience here, Michael wants to know, are there going to be sequels to Basil's War?
I hope so. Again, if the body is willing and the brain is still reasonably coherent, I hope to do that. I'm moving into a new house, and I have a beautiful. I'm building a beautiful office it's decorated in Art Deco. It'll look like the office, the editor of Time magazine in 1938. even to be a model airplane, signifying the fabulous future that lies ahead for all of us. And I'm hoping to just settle in there and not do much but write all day. Write, shoot, drink, sleep. That's what more is there. That's fine. That's okay. Visit grandchildren. Happy to report I have another grandchild on the way. Well, it's not, I mean, my daughter did the work, but there was going to be another gene carrier coming into the world in July, and that's makes me very pleased. But anyway, I do want to do a lot more work before it's time to go.
I remember a year ago, boy, and the time did go fast, didn't it? Boy, I was really interested about something you said, Steve, when somebody was asking you, the obligatory questions about your writing process, and you said something about how, the most important thing for you, I'm paraphrasing, was just having that focus, having that, I don't know, you give such an interesting answer about how that was so precious to you, was being able to just zone in and keep that focus. Do you remember what you were talking about?
Well, I'm a great believer in what is called commonly called concentration.
Concentration.
And you've got to get to a certain level of concentration to get to the level of the work being interesting. And you've got to train yourself mentally to get there without a lot of drama. And it's just I think when most books, when I run into people all the time who want to write books and never do. And my feeling, and you also run into authors who quote, burn out, unquote. And my feeling about both those issues is that they've somehow lost the capacity. They haven't lost their talent. They haven't lost their ambition, but they've lost the ability to get to the fifth level of concentration. And you have to be on that fifth floor in order to do the work. And you have to train yourself to get there reasonably early so that you're not exhausting yourself. You exhaust yourself just to begin the day's work, and that'll never work. You've got to get there in a split second. And it seems like I have not lost that yet. But it's knowing that is maybe that'll help me not lose it, knowing where I have to be.
And there's so many distractions all the time.
Oh, more and more. Yeah. And especially for someone with me who's basically A, lazy, B, disorganized, and C, extremely distractible. I do not have Jack is a soldier of literature. He works 14 hours a day. He probably never goes to the bathroom. He the only thing he does is smoke 7 or 8 packs of cigarettes a day, something like that. Anyway, I couldn't work that. I can't stay there that long. 2 hours is about it for me. And I can't. I feel myself fraying and dissipating if I stay too long. And the pregnant pauses when I'm thinking become endless pauses when I'm daydreaming. That's not good. So it's much better than to take a break and have a glass of wine and watch a ball game or something. My hobby, if I have nothing else to do, I'll go torment my wife for a while. And that's the sort of thing I really enjoy doing. So, I can always.
Jack is amazing. Only Jack could actually lead Jack's life. And I'm convinced if you hadn't done your time in the military, Jack, you just never could survive the life you've got now. It's got to be a lot more exhausting than when you were actually in the field.
It is. There's no doubt about that. I'm just going 1,000 miles an hour all day, every day. And my goal for moving forward here is to get a little more organized on some of these things and let go of a few of the things that maybe I don't have to do. Some of the social media stuff and like some of that, like doing the actual physical, tactical level work there, and maybe just giving some strategic vision and allowing myself time when I'm not exhausted to do the writing. That's what
understand.
I love doing. The other stuff supports and allows me to continue to do what I love. But today it's all a part of it. So
You and I are way too much alike, you know, we just feel like we can do it all.
well,
Every
yeah,
day I get up and I think, you know, I'm going to have an easy day. And every day, 14 hours later, I'm going, what happened?
well, I'll
I
tell you what,
know.
the all-nighters that I pulled for this book that's coming out here in May for In the Blood, these all-nighters, that I felt them a lot more than I had all-nighters in the past. And I can only assume from that information, that experience, that it's only going to get more difficult to pull multiple all-nighters in the future as I get older. So I'm going to get a little more organized here. We too moved to a new house, so I have a separate part for business stuff, a separate part for writing, a separate podcast studio. So now I'm getting more organized. That's my goal this year anyway.
That's excellent. Patrick, do we have any more actual questions?
Yeah. Actually, let's see here. Somebody's looking for advice for an aspiring / reluctant writer. And I think Steve just gave the best advice.
Yeah.
For a question from John for both of you guys. What is your preferred personal handgun?
Uh,
Yeah.
it's almost like, gee, picking a preferred child. No, I would say, I would answer that if I had a carry license, what would I carry? And I'm very partial now. I've sort of fallen in love with the Sig Sauer 320 line, and those are superbly engineered guns. They're very accurate. They have excellent trigger pulls, especially if you get the flat tactical trigger. And if I were to carry a gun, it would probably be a 320 with some kind of optical sight on it, a red dot. And I would feel, well, because it's light, it's flat, it's compact, it's easily packable. Actually, for just sheer shooting pleasure, I have a couple of 38 wad cutter target guns, the famous Smith model 51, I think it is. And then I have a couple of Gold Cup Colt 38 wad cutters, and just being able to hit the bull consistently at 25 yards. It's just it's taken me so long to get there that doing it is it's its own reward. It just really, really feels good. It's just so much fun. Jack?
I would agree on the SIG P320 line, but right now I have a P365 on my hip right here. Just it's compact, so that's what I usually carry. But there's this thing, and a P320 AXG Scorpion. For whatever reason, it's a SIG P320, but it feels like my 226 that I carried downrange for all my deployments. So
right.
I'm kind of partial to those two right now. And I wish I just put it in the safe though. Stephen, I want to show this to you. It's a 357 made by a company that Beretta bought. So I'm going to butcher the name, but it starts with an M, and people can look it up on the Beretta site. But it's a 357 that the GIGN used, and there's a video on.
Manturin.
Manturin, that's it. That's the
it.
one
Yeah,
right
okay,
there.
yeah.
So I just got their
beautifully made.
M73.
Yeah.
It's what's that?
I'm sorry.
No, it's made in France. Beretta bought them, I think, or something along those lines. But I just got one because it's someone saw my friend saw a post I did on the GIGN, which is the French Special Operations guys. And there's a video where the founder of that unit is talking about why they chose a revolver, why they chose a 357, why they chose this particular pistol. And so I got their commemorative M73 just the other day, and I just put it in the safe.
Let me just quickly tout a movie here for Jack. Maybe you've heard of this movie, maybe you not. It's called The 15-Minute War. It is about the founding of GIGN as a sniper unit and their first deployment in a bus hostage situation right on the border of, I think it was Morocco and Algeria in the early 60s. And it's very well done. And it's, they're using those clunky French sniper rifles. I forget what they were called, but it's very well done. And the four guys who are on the team are vividly evoked. And as I say, it builds to a 15-minute war. and the action sequence at the end is brilliantly handled, and it's really it's set in that world. If you have any interest, I love special operations everywhere, but I'm quite interested in the French and GIGN operations, and this is a real good look at them. And I'm sure I saw it on, then I was like films on demand or something like that. It should be real easy to find. But check out the 15-Minute War, and that's for all the
I
other
just wrote it down.
people out there who are interested in stuff like that.
Excellent.
Well,
Patrick,
my wife
any
will
other
be
questions?
thrilled because that's what we're going to do later tonight. So my
Good.
wife thinks so, I'm sure.
Honey, honey, I've got the Chateau Neuf de Pape and a French war movie. What could
That's
be
it.
more romantic?
That's it. Yeah. Well, she's used to it now after 21 years of marriage. So
Yeah,
it didn't come as a shock.
yeah.
I guess as a final question, John wants to know, he says, I know we have Jack's series coming up. Will we be seeing any more movies or TVs based on Stephen's work?
Good question, and I wish I had an answer. There are some subterranean rumblings, but there's nothing that I can put a finger on or can track down. You just never, it's an unknown land, and you don't know when someone is. Some producer could pick up a book in an airport and that he'd never heard of and read it, and that's if it was one of mine, he'd say, "Damn, I got to make a movie out of this one." That can always happen. I don't know if it'll happen. Dirty White Boys has been a failed project in Hollywood, and maybe someone will finally get it together enough to make that. Would probably be, if a movie comes, that would probably be the first movie out of the blocks. I was hoping, I had high hopes for Basil's War, but see, the Bob Lee Swagger stuff is all tied up with Paramount, and that's a huge obstacle unless someone has a relationship already with Paramount. So that's what's sort of freezing that. And there's a lot of other stuff that we're hoping. I'd still like to see The Master Sniper become a movie. It's pretty good, neat little story. It could be done, for under $50 million. That's chicken feed these days. And but no, I have nothing to report. I'm sorry. They're waiting for me to die, is what it is.
There's so many streaming services that you can't really predict anymore. It used to be there were just a few channels, but now there are zillions. So let's have great hope. Well, this has really been wonderful. It's probably halftime, or maybe halftime's over. So some of you will want to retreat to the game. I would like to say that in 32 years, there have been some really high moments at the Poison Pen. And one of them, which I will always treasure, was bringing Stephen Hunter and Jack Carr and Mark Greaney together, all for the first time at the Poison Pen. That was really a magical night, guys.
That was a magical night.
It really was. And, I had hoped we could do it again, and then COVID has interrupted us. But I'm so grateful that we at least had that one chance, even if we don't get to do it again. So I'm hoping that we'll see Jack in May. I'm hoping we'll see Stephen next year, when we can investigate reopening the shooting gallery and the Poison Pen parking lot. But in the meantime, Stephen, thank you for signing books for us. Let me say they're not a huge number already or still not sold, but I would really recommend grabbing a Targeted while you can. It's a wonderful read for so many reasons, some of which we've touched on tonight. And I think there's a message in it as well, although it's really designed as entertainment.
Yeah.
But think about it. Anyway, good night, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Jack, dear, always a pleasure. Stephen, and love to your beautiful wife. And
I will.
Patrick, thank you very much. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you both.
Thank you all
so